Thank you very much. President Raveau, thank you. I thank you, and Dr. Paula Raveau, thank you for meeting me outside with your daughter as a father of a grown daughter. I wonder if you have shared my experience. It's humbling, rewarding, and occasionally frustrating to have a child who knows more than you do about everything. I think she thought she did when she was in high school, but eventually it was true. I'm honored to be here. I thank you for the degree. I thank Governor Wilder for his introduction. We have been friends a long time. We served together. I was impressed by his leadership as Governor of Virginia and impressed by his servanthood when he went back to serve as mayor. And I asked him, I said, on the way up here, I said, Doug, did you enjoy being mayor? He said, yeah, I really liked it. He said, but he said, the good news is you're closer to the people. The bad news is you're just close enough for them to strangle you if you mess up. I want to say how great it is for me to be here at Howard. First, because in 2009 I was inducted as an honorary member of Phi Beta Sigma, which was founded here 99 years ago. And I'm not quite that old, although I look it some days. But I also am glad to be here because of the record of this great university. And I want to try to talk about not only Howard's leadership and preparing people for science, engineering, technology, and mathematics careers, not only the record of the medical school in addressing the health disparities, and I have to say this for the rest of my family, the phenomenal success you have in producing women surgeons, which I am impressed with. But more importantly, to me, is the national leadership Howard has shown across all these disciplines and all the ones I didn't mention in service. I thank you for the community service you have done here while you're at Howard. I thank you for your interest in doing this around the world. I've had pulled from my records the number of commitments involving Howard University students or faculty made through the Clinton Global Initiative Network. There were 10 different commitments. The most recent of which is that Howard is one of 13 medical schools committed to totally retrain the healthcare workforce in Rwanda. And why this is important is Rwanda was devastated, as we all know, by its genocide. All the hospitals but the one in the capital city were destroyed. I, working with my friend Dr. Paul Farmer, helped to rebuild them in every part of the country. But they don't want to take any foreign assistance from anybody to do anything after 2020. And so they have to not only have hospitals and people trained to work there, but rural clinics and community health workers. And so they asked us to put together a plan to do it. Dr. Eric Goolsbee, President Obama's appointee as head of PEPFAR, the President's plan to deal with AIDS and other life-threatening diseases, agreed to finance this for a year and a half. But listen to this, you should be really proud of Howard for this. Every one of these schools, including Howard, is committed to doing this work for 3 or 4 years for only 7% overhead, the lowest in the history of any foreign assistance program. And I think you should be really, really proud. You are going to save countless of lives for decades and decades. I am well aware that the commencement speech is the least important part of this day. I congratulate all of you who are here, your parents, your friends, your loved ones. I thank those who taught you and worked to keep this university going, and the supporters of Howard who are here. But unlike almost every other person here who's older, I actually remember who gave my commencement speech 45 years ago, next month. And I remember exactly what the speech was. We were like this on the lawn at Georgetown, just across town. It started out to be a clear day. Then all of a sudden, this huge storm cloud came over, and the lightning began to dance in the sky. And a Howard graduate, the mayor of Washington, D.C., Walter Washington, stood up at the podium, as I am. He looked at the sky, he looked at the shivering students, and he said, "Congratulations. If we don't get out of here, we're all going to drown." If you want a copy of my speech, you write me and I'll send you one. Good luck. All three went. Now, what did I learn from that? The most successful commencement speeches are brief and highly relevant. So, wherever we are, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the memory. When you leave here, it is important for you to remember that you have been empowered to do something most people who ever lived could not do. Even with the employment situation and the economic challenges, virtually all of you have the power to choose what you will do to earn a living. It may sound self-evident, but most people who have ever lived, including hundreds of millions, even billions of people on the face of the earth today, never had that choice. They simply did whatever was at hand, in whatever form it presented itself, to put food on the table, and if they had a family, to support their families. You have a choice. The only bit of personal advice I have is this: try to do something that'll make you happy. And most people are happiest doing what they are best at. You have been given that gift. That is the ultimate gift Howard has given you. You are going out into a world that is the most interdependent world in history. You can see it not just in trade, but travel, in increasing diversity. Look how diverse America is. Pretty soon, there will be no majority race. There is no majority race in California or Hawaii. And by 2050, there will be no majority in America. We'll just be one big group of people that will have to think of something to hold ourselves together. And it's very important. So the second thing I want to say to you is this. The world has many challenges. You know them. There's too much inequality. It's manifested for most college students in the fact that they haul out of college with too much debt and wonder if they're going to be able to repay it. And it's manifested for most people that don't have a college degree because they've been working 10 years without much of a pay raise. And it's manifested all over the world by a global jobs crisis for young people. When the Arab Spring occurred in Egypt, and you saw those incredibly articulate young people in Tahrir Square in Cairo, one of the reasons they were there is that every year their university system churned out 400,000 college graduates, and their economy never produced anywhere near 400,000 jobs for college graduates. So there's a lot of inequality in this world. There's a lot of instability in the world, manifested by the financial crisis and how quickly it spread across the world, but also in how all these wonderful open borders could lead to what happened at the Boston Marathon. 2 boys come here looking for a college education, seem to be doing well, and this or that or the other thing goes wrong, and they decide that the only way their lives can have meaning is to take some other people's lives away. They were not empowered as you are. Just about a year before, you remember that another young man tried to blow up a car bomb in Times Square in New York. He and his wife got college degrees in America. He had a job and a home mortgage, and then, like a lot of Americans, he lost it. Most of us were raised to face failure in the face, and pick ourselves up, and go back to work, and make something good happen. And I hope you will do that. But somehow he thought this isolated him from the rest of the world, so the only way his life could matter is if he took away the lives of people he didn't even know. So the first decision we have to make, before we can get to all the policies and all the things that would change the world for the better, is to share the future, to try to create a world of shared prosperity, where there is shared responsibility, where everybody can be a part of a community as long as they believe in certain values, including equal treatment and the absence of violence and the opportunity to begin again. Not to be free of failure, the opportunity to begin again. This whole thing comes down in the end to whether we think the future will be better if we face it with open hands or closed fists. One of the things that heartened me when President Obama asked Hillary to be Secretary of State, and she said yes, and they developed this not just working relationship, this amazing friendship, which I just watched with great interest, is that they had fought this. Oh, come on. Laugh about this stuff. Is that they fought this huge campaign, tooth and nail, trench campaign, down to the end. He was big enough to ask her to be Secretary of State. She was big enough to take it. They trusted each other. And they both acknowledged that differences in their positions were not that profound, and there was a world out there that had to be healed, the world that America had to make a place in, a world we had to try to make work for the things we believe in. And it was amazing, and I would travel around the world, and my foundation works in 70, 80 countries, depending on what projects we're doing in a given year. And all these politicians I used to know would just marvel at this. They said, you know, and I thought, this is the way the world's supposed to work. We have our differences, we have our arguments, you have elections, it's over, and people join hands and work together. Washington is dysfunctional today largely because people can't find anything to work together on. They think our differences are more important than what we have in common. Wait for the next election, maybe you'll get in power. And I say that because every one of us has to make a decision like that every day. You can't live in a world that is interdependent, where the walls come down and borders look more like nets. And you can't keep every bad thing out anywhere. Unless most people believe that what we have in common is more important than our interesting differences. Turns out, there is not only a religious basis for this in all faiths. The Quran said that Allah put different peoples on the earth, not that they might despise one another, but that they might come to know one another and learn from one another. The Torah says that he who turns aside from a stranger might as well turn aside from the Most High God. The Christian Bible says you should love your neighbor as yourself. And it is the second most important commandment after loving God. The Dhammapada of the Buddha says you are not truly human unless when you see the arrow piercing your neighbor's body, you feel it as if it had pierced yours. Now, in addition to that, we now know that it is scientifically true. I spent $3 billion of your money to finish the sequencing of the human genome. Now, all the people in the sciences will tell you what has happened for that. It's the best money we ever spent. It's generated massive economic activity, already given us the variances in the gene that make young women at higher risk of breast cancer if they have them. We've learned patterns that make little children susceptible to certain kinds of cancers, and already medicines have been developed which have saved their lives, and we've just begun. But the most important thing for all of you is that when the genome was sequenced, we learned that look around this crowd, every non-age related difference you can see, including race and gender, are all rooted in 1/2 of 1% of your genome. We are all 99.5% the same. Now, because of our ability to do genetic history, we found interesting relatives. You know, which would make for funny things. Some of the people that Washington politicians over the last 10 years found in their lineage have embarrassed them in terms of their current politics. But the most important thing is we are all 99.5% the same. The other thing is, before we get too arrogant about this, we all spend 99.5% of our time thinking about the 0.5% of us that's different. Don't we? All of us. You walk down the street by a store window and you see your reflection, you think, oh, I wish I was a little taller. That's also focusing on the 0.5%. Now, the 0.5% matters. Gave Einstein the biggest brain ever measured. He made pretty good use of it. It's a good thing. That 0.5% means LeBron James is hard to stop if he's driving for the basket. The 0.5% matters, but so does the 99.5%. And that's why this service ethic counts. And when you leave here, I want you to never forget for the rest of your life, in good times and bad, that you live in an interdependent world, and we've got to pull it together. Which means to be a good citizen, you got to do something sometime for somebody else because they're just like you are. That is really, really important. The last point I want to make is it's very good economics. A few years ago, an American journalist named James Surowiecki wrote a book called The Wisdom of Crowds, in which he chronicled all these experiments, which all come down to this. If I pick 20 of you at random from this crowd, and I put you in a nice room in Howard, and the person with the highest measured IQ here, in this entire crowd, the biggest genius here, went into another room. And then we just kept feeding questions in there. How do you solve this problem? That problem. How can we end world hunger? How can we bring distributed solar power to the poorest places on earth? How can we create more jobs for young Americans? How can we employ long-term unemployed people who don't have even a high school diploma? I just kept feeding questions in. Over time, the room with the crowd would make better decisions than the room with the genius. It turns out that there is an economic and social imperative that compels those of us who understand it to work together. It turns out that creative cooperation works better than constant conflict, and we forget that at our power. If you can't share the future unless you share the responsibility for building it, and I implore you to look for opportunities to do that. The last thing I would say is that you are living in a time that is changing so fast, it is more likely than not that even if you start out fast, something will happen that you will find frustrating. You have to be able to begin again. And you have to be able to begin again without blaming somebody else in a way that isolates you from them. Perhaps we'll never know what tipped the scales for those young men who did that terrible thing at the Boston Marathon. Perhaps we'll never fully understand what happened to that young man who drove the car bomb into Times Square. And all the others who found that all their cooperation options were closed, and the only way they could say, hey, look at me, I matter, I mean something, is to take somebody else down. If you are going to avoid that, you have to be able to begin again. The thing I like about being here today is that you still like to laugh. It's a part of our culture, you know. And it's an essential thing in life. But I will close with this story. And I hope you will remember. Try to do something that makes you happy. Try to find a way to serve. Try never to forget what we have in common is more important than our interesting and profoundly important differences. And don't give up on yourself or your life. One of the most rewarding experiences that I had or have had since I left the White House is the opportunity to work in South Asia after that horrible tsunami which occurred a couple of years before Hurricane Katrina. You remember that? It was devastating to Indonesia and Southeast India and Sri Lanka and the Maldives, parts of Thailand. President Bush asked me to work with his father for a while. I did that, and I worked for the UN for 2 years, and we had a great time. Because of the disaster, a long-standing civil conflict in Indonesia was settled because we brought back the fishing to them together. We brought new opportunities to grow and sell coffee to them together. But in every disaster, as you remember from Katrina and as we now see in Haiti where I'm working, the housing is always the hardest thing to fix. So there was one tent city with 40,000 people in Indonesia and Aceh where people were sweltering, miserable in these hot tents. And as the UN coordinator, I had to go visit and let them unload on me because we were 6 months late in getting them out of there. And I showed up, and the president of the camp was there. They had elected a president. And he introduced me to his wife and to his son. A 10-year-old boy that I still believe to this day is the single most beautiful child I have ever seen. His eyes were luminous. And I had a young Indonesian woman working as my interpreter. So when I started the tour with the father, the president of the camp, the mother and the son went off, and I said, I believe that is the most beautiful boy I ever saw in my life. And she said to me, yes, he's very handsome. Before the tsunami, he had 9 brothers and sisters. They're all gone. Every last one. Now I have 2 points to make. First, this man who had lost 9 of his 10 children led me through that camp with a smile on his face and never talked about anything but what those other people needed and what he wanted me to do for them. He honored his children by pouring himself into meeting the needs of the people left on earth. So they ended it at the health clinic because they knew I'd done a lot of work in this area. And they were talking, and all of a sudden, the man's wife shows up again. This time holding a 3-day-old baby. She said, "This is our youngest resident, and we want you to name this child." And she was carrying the baby, not the mother. I hesitate to tell you all this, but in their culture, when a mother gives birth to a new baby, she gets to go to bed for 40 days and be waited on. You should, there's Congressman Cummings, ask him to introduce that next week. See how far that gets in this Congress. But anyway. So this woman, who had lost 9 of her 10 children, with a smile on her face, is holding this baby. And I said, you really want me to name the child? It was a boy. She said, "Yes." I said, through my interpreter, "What's the word in your family? Do you have a word in your language that can be a name that means new beginning?" And this woman got a big smile on her face, and she said to me through the interpreter, said, "Yes, lucky for you. In our language, the word dawn, D-A-W-N, is a boy's name, not a girl's name. We will name this boy Dawn, and he will be the symbol of our new beginning." I am telling you this because no matter what happens to you, it is highly unlikely that you will ever face anything as awful as what happened to that mother and father. They somehow found the strength to treasure the one who remained and to serve others. That is the heritage that you take with you from Howard. That is what your people are doing in Rwanda, half a world away. If you do what makes you happy, and you don't give up, and you keep serving, I think you will live in the most interesting, prosperous, and peaceful time in human history. Good luck, and God bless you all.